Hello there, math fans, and welcome to today's broadcast of Lesson 2-3, Modeling with Equations. Too much? Okay, I get it. So we'll be on page 26 today, but seriously, I am so sorry I can't be there today, and I'm hoping that this mix will just help you kind of reason through a few things if you got stuck doing it on your own. So let's get started. It says here, the Future Engineers of America Club, FEA, wants to raise money for a field trip to the Science Museum. The club members will hold an engineering contest to raise the money. They're deciding between two different contests, the Straw Bridge contest and the Card Tower contest. The Straw Bridge contest will cost the club $5.50 per competitor, so that's a cost the club $5.50 per competitor, plus $34.60 in extra expenses. The Card Tower contest will cost $4.25 per competitor plus $64.60 in extra expenses. So that's Card Tower and this is Straw Bridge. Okay, so just kind of organizing the info for myself there. To help decide which contest to host, club members want to determine how many competitors they would need for the cost of the two contests to be the same. Well, we know the same means equal, so we probably need to find some expressions to represent each contest. Let's see what they're going to ask us to do. Define a variable. That means tell us what it's going to stand for and what we're using. Explaining what it represents. Write an equation that sets the cost of the two contests equal. All right, let's see. Well, in each contest, what we have is competitors, and that's what things are going to depend on. So let's say X is going to stand for competitors. That is my variable definition, define a variable. Okay, and then write an equation that sets the two costs equal. So up here I'm going to write some expressions. So Straw Bridge, I'll just call it SB, is going to be 5.5 per competitor plus $34.60. And then we got Card Tower, I'll call that CT. That one's going to cost $4.25 per competitor plus $64.60. So if I write those expressions to represent each contest, then if I want to find out when the two contests would be equal, I'll just make that an equation out of those. So 5.5x plus $34.60, in other words, the Straw Bridge, when would it be equal to the Card Tower, which is 425x plus 64.60? So how many competitors, if we solve this for x, we'd get the number of competitors, and then we'd know how many competitors made the two contests equal. All right, now they want us to solve our equation by using the algebraic method, and then we're going to show each step and list a property and provide an explanation for each step. So listing properties is not necessary to solve equations, but the reason they're asking us to do it is when we get to our geometry units in a few weeks and we start doing two-column proofs, knowing how to say what we just did to get to the next step is going to make things a lot easier for us. So the first thing they want us to do, and this is a good idea to get rid of decimals. They gave us a hint. If we multiply each side by 100, we could get rid of 2 decimal places, which for the 425 we'd need to get rid of 2 decimal places. So if I multiply each side by 100, every term gets multiplied by 100, so the decimal moves 2 places. So I would have 550x plus 3460 equals 425x plus 6460. Then I'd get my variables on one side. So if I show that real tiny, I'd probably minus 425x from both sides. So my next step would look like, the result of my step would look like 125x plus 3460 equals 6460. And what I did was the subtraction property of equality. I'll call it subtraction POE for short. Then I would get rid of the constant on the left side so that I could have my variables on one side and my constants on the other. So then I'd have 125x equals 3,000. And that's again the subtraction POE. Then I divide by 125. I'll just show that real tiny. And so we'd end up with, what's 3,000 divided by 125? You're not copying me, right? Make sure you're doing your own calculations. So hopefully you're coming. You can always pause this if you hadn't already done it. Pause it while you're watching and see what you get. So that should be an equal sign there. X equals 24, hopefully. And that would be the division. We just divided division POE. That got us to there. All right. So this was subtraction, and then I repeated it. That's what these little marks mean. Same thing again. And there we have it. So we got an answer of x equals 24. And we had already said that x stands for competitors. So if we're going to interpret our answer in the context of the problem, remember we set the two different contests equal. So we would say if there are 24 competitors, the costs of both events, we'll call them, or competitions, would be the same, because we set them equal and solved it. So we found out when they'd be the same. Then it says the FEA club estimates they'll have more than 30 competitors in their contest. Make a recommendation to the club explaining which contest would be the better choice to sponsor and why. Well, if we look back at our two expressions, we have one of them that says 5.5x plus 3460. Boy, I'm doing this from memory. I hope this is right. And 4.25x plus 6460. This is Strawbridge, and this is Card Tower. So if we already knew they were going to be equal at 24 competitors, and there were going to be more competitors than that. So the competitors, is that going to affect the 3460 in the problem, the number of competitors? No, so that's not really a factor here. The 6460, that's not really a factor. What's going to change if you have more competitors, you have more x's, is it's going to multiply to this part, right? So which one's going to be cheaper? This one, right? This one would be cheaper. So we would recommend Card Tower. It will be less expensive for anything more than 24 competitors. Now take the time to, pause and think about this and make sure you're understanding why all that is the case. All right, so up to now we were just considering how much it costs to run the contest. Well, of course, there's another side to that, which is how much money we're going to make off either contest. So now we're going to talk about that. The FEA club will charge each competitor $10 to enter the engineering contest. Write an expression for the club's revenue, that means how much they make, if X competitors enter the contest. Well, they're going to get $10 for each competitor, so 10x would be their revenue if X stands for competitors. Now we're going to write an equation to find the break-even point for the fundraiser using the contest you recommended to the FEA club. Now there's a lot packed into that little sentence. We're going to find the break-even point. So first of all, that means when income equals expense. That's when you break even. After that, you start making a profit. So we want to know the one we recommended. So that was Card Tower, right? And the expense for Card Tower was 425x plus 6460. The profit, we want to know when it's going to equal the income. Well, the income is 10x, right? So this is the income. This is the expense for the one we recommended. So if we solve this, we'll know how many competitors have to come in order for us to, you know, break even and start making money. So let's see, we could multiply everything by 100 again and get rid of decimals. 425x plus 6460 equals 1000x. And then why don't we minus our 425x to both sides so that we get our x's on one side, and we'll just keep our constants on this side. So if we do 1000 minus 425, I'm going to get 575. And then we'd have to divide, right, by 575. So if we divide 6460, and I'm going to say this again, I hope you're doing this yourself, right? It won't have a lot of meaning if you're just writing it down because I said it. So I get x equals 1123, right? Well, you can't have, you know, 11 and 23 hundredths of a competitor. So we won't break even on 11 competitors. We need more, right? 11 competitors, and if we did that, the expense would still be higher than the income. So we need more than 11. So we'll have to say 12 competitors before expenses are covered. So it's not exactly a break-even point, but it is the point at which you can start making profit. So I'm not going to have room here covered. So it would break even after 11 competitors. So after 11, so we'd have 12 competitors or more. That's important. That'll happen on a test for sure, where it comes out as a decimal here. And the rounding rules say you round if the number after it, whatever you round to, like a whole number, if the number's 5 or higher. Well, this is only 0.23, but the fact is it's more than 11, and we can't have parts of people. So if it's any part at all of something that can't be partial, we have to round it up to the next whole number. So we'll call it 12. Oops, I guess you realized that I already did part B in part A. Part A was just write the equation. Part B was solve the equation and then state a property of equality for each step. So if I think back to it, I think the first thing I did was multiply by 100 on both sides. Then I used the subtraction POE to move my x term over, and then I used the division POE to get x isolated. So again, our answer was 12 competitors. I hope you're enjoying this. I know, you know, you got to dig in a little bit, but it's all math you've already done before, but it's applied. So now you're actually trying to figure things out, which makes it a lot more useful, which is the whole point of learning things. Let's see what else they got for us. Ah, cool. This is where the important part comes in. So if you're the one in charge of this club, you want to know how much profit you're going to make. So we've recommended the card tower, and we know that they're going to have 32 competitors. So we want to find out how much we're going to actually make, how much profit we're going to make. So they tell us over here, profit is revenue minus cost. So we know the revenue function, we already have both of these equations. Equations and functions are the same thing. So the revenue function was 10x. So we would have, so our income would be 10 times 32, so that would be 320. So we'd have $320 coming in, and then our expense function or expression would be, let's see, what was that one? 4.25 x plus 6460. So that's 4.25 times 32 plus 64.60. 64 and 60 cents. Make sure you're doing your own calculations. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's easy to all of a sudden turn into a spectator, and that's not how math works. It's not a spectator sport. So pause it if you need time to do it yourself, and then restart it. So I'm getting 136 plus 64.60, which means our total cost would be $200.60. So profit is revenue minus cost, so 320 minus our cost, $200.60, will leave us with a final profit of you're supposed to have a drum roll. Oh, I can't figure out how to do like drum roll effects. That would be much cooler if I could, but anyway, I guess I could have just, tried to make one with my mouth, but like be silly. And if I tried to do it on the table, I'd probably drop the whole computer. So anyway, I'm getting a profit of $119.40 for the little card tower competition if 32 competitors come. Not too bad for an afternoon competition. Alrighty then. Now, the Future Engineers of America Club treasurer was going back through the fundraising records. They already got this thing on the road, I guess. On Monday, the club made revenue of $140 selling contest tickets at $10 each. One person sold 8 tickets, but the other person selling that day forgot to write down how many she sold. Way to go, Turbo. Good help is so hard to find. Write and solve an equation to determine the number of tickets the other person sold. Let's see. So I guess X would be the tickets that person sold, because that's what we're looking for. So we want to always define a variable before we go off writing an equation. So we know that the total income was $140, and we know that the tickets were $10 each. So this person, $10 per ticket, plus the other persons know that they sold 8, so they sold 8, and those are $10. So I don't know, that might confuse you the way I did that. So if I set it up like this, the tickets are $10 each, and the person sold, we don't know how many, and then they're $10 each, and we know that the other person sold 8. So if I keep it in the same order, might make sense to people that are just struggling a little bit. So then if we solve this, we'd have 80 here, 140. So then 140 minus 80 is 60. Is that true? Yeah, that's true. And then divide by 10, and so X is going to equal 6. So the other person sold 6 tickets. Always put your answer in context. What is it that you just found out? Make sure it makes sense. Does it add up? Would it make the story true? If they sold 6, that would be $60. This person sold 8, which is $80. And if you add up 60 plus 80, that's the 140 that they made. So if you haven't already answered these, pause this office mix and answer them yourself, because this is going back to some stuff you just did, and it's really valuable stuff to know. So think it through. And it asks us, how can you use the multiplication property of equality to rewrite the equation so that the numbers in the problem are integers and not decimals? Well, in this case, if we look at all the decimals, the worst case scenario is 1 decimal place, so we could multiply each side by 10, and that would clear the decimals. And so the 10 would go to each term, because you multiply this whole side and this whole side, so it would distribute to both of these terms. So 10 will get distributed to each term. Alright, when writing an expression or equation to represent a real-world situation, why is it important to be able to describe what each part of the expression or equation represents? I think that the gist is that these problems have a lot of things happening in them, and there can be a lot of components and multiple players in the story, and you want to make sure that your variable is defined so you know what that stands for and what each term in your expression is representing, so that you can make sure that they work, that they are representing the story in the context that it was given. I'll let you put that in your own words there. Okay, so now I'll leave it to you, be your job, just like always, to try a few all by yourself without any guidance. And so you'll do 11 through 16. I put some stars next to a couple really important ones. I'm always trying to guide you towards your next assessment. So make sure you're paying attention to interpreting within the context of the problem. What does it mean exactly that you found out? And then justify your response. Explain yourself. And then be sure to check your work. So remember, you're going to go on JT Learn to do that. I think I'll even just show that on the next slide here to make sure everybody knows how to check your work. All right, so today is Wednesday, August 30th, right? So I'm going to go to my class page. I'm going to scroll down to this date. There's the lesson we're doing right there, lesson 2-3. So I'll click the key. Now that's going to take me to the entire lesson, right? So we're just looking for the stuff at the end. You can look through all of it if you want to, but you're looking for the stuff at the end here. So notice that there are no answers right here in it, so they'll be around the edges and they're not on the sides. They may be here down on the bottom. So here are the answers. But now don't look at them until after you give it a try. Okay, so that's how you'll check your work. Then if you don't get it right, don't erase your work. Keep it. You can write the right stuff down also, and that'll give you some questions to ask me, and I'll be able to see what was it exactly that you did and how close were you. So, okay, that is what you got to do. Guys, thank you again for your hard work, independence, and responsibility today. Obviously, I haven't even talked to the sub yet, but I know that they're going to be amazed by what you accomplished, and you haven't even had 10 days of high school yet. So please remember, I have to have this procedure done, and then I have to stay flat for a while, and so but I can certainly respond to remind messages and emails later. Don't get your phones out while the sub's there. And then remember that you also have an assessment on Friday. Like we've been talking about it every day. But if you get done early and you have extra time, be sure you're focusing on those pages 35 and 36. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Great job.